There is a time of air upon us. As astrologers, we're reading star maps from our ancestral lineages that have left us the myths and story magic of those ancestors as guides to find our way through the rhythms of time and space and the energies that aspect us, the relationships that we have with the movements, just like the moon and the tide move. We're so moved. We're mostly made of water. And these poles of these entities in the universe we're in move us and we move with them. They move the entire ecosystem through rhythms of change, through ebbs and flows with the moon, and in amazing weavings throughout the year that aren't just the ebb and flow of the new moon to full moon to new moon. That's a beautiful ebb and flow that we're moved with. But there's also other ones with the moon where the new moon actually has a relationship with the full moon of its own sign later in the year. And when we plant seeds at the new moon, it's going to grow and manifest till the fullness of of the full moon months down the road. So we've got ebbs and flows of all kinds and different cycles and layers. And it's like a weaving. It's actually like music or like weaving. And it's important to study the movements because they create the forms of our world and our bodies, our thoughts, our emotions, our spiritual journeys. These forms are what this music and this tapestry of weaving movements create. Another thing that's beautiful about astrology, if you want to look at it, is it's a study of change. One thing we look at mostly for an individual is the birth chart, which is the moment of somebody's birth where they go through a kind of death in a way and rebirth. This moment of change is so extreme. I like to think of it as a shattering, like in a Jewish wedding where you smash the glass because it's never the same. And in Scorpio, and reminds me of Scorpio in that it's about death and rebirth and change that's permanent. You're left different, transformation, that kind of, or evolution, those kinds of change and death and rebirth. And so when I think about the birth chart as the thing that we look at in that moment of the first breath, there's so much beautiful magic in it of that shattering, of never the same. It even looks like a spider web or a weaving tapestry, but you can also see it like it looking like a shatter, like a snapshot of that moment, of that shatter, and look at what that weaving, that song, that moment was, like a freeze frame in a video. It's like, and you can study that your whole life because what it shows is where you've come from, where you're going, because whole time exists. And it shows the forms that you bring in past, present, future that create now. And so you can look at time and space and reality through that framework of the birth chart, how significantly accurate it is, and for a whole lifespan, as a tool to and a guide and a map to work with who you are and the forms and patterns that you are. What that means is your soul, as it's relating to your ancestral soul in this embodied lifetime, and like the weavings of the lessons, the truths, the forms, the patterns. What we have in body, mind, and spirit are a whole bunch of patterns. They form our DNA, like language. They're these stories. They form our thoughts, our emotions, they form our tendencies and our potentials. So the astrology chart, it's the map of the potential of who you are and the way that you tend to manifest. It's your tendencies, it's your potential. A lot of times people focus a lot on who you are and read the chart that way. I like to look at it as a tendency and a potential map because what we're doing is constantly changing. So we don't want to focus too much on like it being who we are, because then we get stuck again. The point is I actually think that the astrology map is a map of our potentials, and also in that our tendencies, because everything in the chart is based on polarities. Everything in this realm is based on polarities. The chart's actually a map of how we can actually get polarized and fall out of center. And that can be in places, in ways that are the strong, empowered side of every sign and archetype and planet, or that can be more the disempowered side of them. And given that the map of the stars shows potential, we get into habits that create polarization most often. Maybe I don't know if I should say most often. We definitely all have this dual nature, and we thrive, and we do live in the exalted gifts of these archetypes too. But often in our birth chart, it's a map of really useful information about how we get polarized in disempowering ways and fall out of center. And actually, in the chart, a lot of people don't look at the center of the chart a lot. There's actually a circle in a lot of astrology charts, and you'll say, oh, your sun's here, and then there's this center, and then the other house and sign opposite you is over there, and then your moon's over here, and the center's here, and the other sign and house is opposite over there. I really like to look at the polarity points for where we get polarized, so those are the places you can anchor into to bring yourself back into center. So I like to look at what's not in the chart, the polarity points, quite a lot, I think, and even the center magic as a place of wellness and home and alignment and true power, the power of where we come back into our whole self. So this is what the astrology map is a map of. And you can look at it compared to your family members. It's called family synastry. You can see how the same archetypes and patterns weave through families and how they land in you. You can see how your soul came in from a past life, what it brought in, what its individual soul journey is. You can see how that interacts with the family soul journey evolution. We're all doing evolutionary work to heal our own soul and our own family's soul. And so it's a map for that. It's a guide for how you might get polarized and tend to, and how that even comes from your family or your past life, and how you can then use that information and some polarity points and center magic to come back into wholeness. And this is healing, because when we do that, we evolve, we reclaim power, we reclaim exiled power that's in our own soul and in our own stories and in our own lineages. That's where trauma thrives, is not thrives. Trauma teaches us evolution, really. It's an initiator of loss, of change, of these dramatic life birth moments that cause us to never be the same. That's what trauma is. And what it does when we get triggered and our trauma patterns get triggered, which the astrology chart's a very good map for, those are intense polarities that we get into. They're the places that we actually feel hyper arousal, hyper vigilant, hyper sensory, just over like a lot of intensity. And that intensity is actually just the exiled power, because it's an intense place of polarization that we get stuck in those places where we're triggered. So astrology is such a useful map. It's a map for reclaiming power and coming back into wholeness. And you can look at it with there's many layers that are in the weaving, including the inner planets, but I also like to look at the outer planets too. They are the slower moving transits, and when they're in your chart, you're going to share those planets placement with people from your generation. And like Pluto moves slow, and being a sign for years, but I don't think it's any less personal. It's a huge planet that we look at in evolutionary astrology, and I just see that group of people in that period of that number of years for each sign. If it's Saturn, it's like that period of a couple years, everybody's working on that Saturn. But it's such a significant thing, the Saturn, the Pluto. the nodes of the moon are also in a sign for a couple years. That's your collective evolution and your own personal evolution. A lot of people like to think, oh, it's not, the personal planets are the ones that are faster moving. Mercury, Mars, Venus, the moon, those transits are more personal in your chart. Well, yes, they may define your character. They change a lot. They really form the variety of individuation in charts. But everybody in that cohort of these longer transits and these outer planets, those are intimate journeys. Those are initiations. I think that the things we do over like long times are the kind of work we do in reclaiming witchcraft. Is called like the pearl pentacle work. It's like this slow moving, embodied, earthbound. Like the pearl has a nacre in the shell and then forms the pearl layer by layer under pressure. I mean, that is a Pluto transit if I ever heard it, or a Saturn transit. So I really like pearl pentacle work, and because it's the work of doing magic in this embodied realm and more like, yeah, well, there's so much to say about that, but I like these I like the work of the pearl. And then these slow transits where we really transform. I like long-term transformation, find it very deep. And so, yeah, I honor all the levels in the chart of work, and I find them very significant, some of the outer planets placements. I even see like generations and cohorts of people that have those shared astrologies as having very significant culture and roles in a larger weaving. And I've been able to see it now because our astrology is like so packed right now. And I see other generations and other cohorts are like, oh, those are the people with Saturn and that. Those are the people with the nodes there. Those are the people with the Pluto there. And you can see their different roles in the different movements through cultural change. And anyways, the chart is amazing. When you get that first breath that creates a birth chart, you get a shattering, a web. I also think it looks like a harp to play music. It's definitely a snapshot of color, sound, and light in body, mind, and the spirit, or like the emotion and the story magic in body, mind, and spirit in whole time. And this shatter, this that is you in that first breath, um, it shows how the energies of the earth and the celestial realms weave together to create your human self. Like in Chinese medicine, the first breath is the moment that at lung one, which is this point right here, the channel system creates and forms, and which is through your fingers and toes how you receive energy from the celestial realms, yang, and the earth realms, yin. So the earth and sky weaves us together. And our first breath is when that happens. We get our channel system created, starting with lung one in our lungs, and then boom, the whole thing manifests. And it shows how the energies of the earth and sky are constantly weaving and reweaving us in every level of our being, our emotional, mental level, our physical level, our spiritual level. And so that's what this birth chart moment is the creation of you as an actualized, individuated self. It's a liminal period in the womb. That moment of the first breath is when you just first start being your own individual, actualized self. It's this moment. And how fascinating that our ancestors knew this and that we are left with it. They are walking with us now to show us how to reclaim power, how to evolve, how to work and be with the energy, rhythms, and cycles, how to be co creators and become more lucid co creators, how to hear the music of the energies of the cosmos that weave through time and space and create us, and how to co-create with them, becoming like this is a dream and we need to become lucid dreamers, right? And understand the lessons, understand the evolution. That's what we're here to do. We're actually not here to perpetuate some kind of productivity goals for rich people and degrade the earth. And no, that's kind of what our entire driven society requires us to do. And it requires us to dissociate while we do it. I think what we're actually facing right now is our own collective mortality. And the fact that we've had to literally be half dead to maintain the current reality, or the reality that has been existing for a long time. It's been violent. We have had to dissociate in order to survive in it. And we are experiencing a huge shift in repatterning right now. And so to understand and study these tools of lineage, of star maps as guides for reclaiming power in the face of our personal and collective trauma, and how that weaves our stories and disempowering polarizations that create oppressive narratives, internalized and also oppressor patterns in us that we enact and perpetuate outside of us. And we are needing to come back into connection and create a reality where all life has a right to its life, and there's a sustained, embodied sovereignty to every life. And we don't all collectively just burn out. So we have this opportunity to create a new story on every level. We deserve all to be well, to thrive, to have a society that we can actually live in. Not just physical survival, but like on every level, survive. And yeah, we're going through a major transformation. So I'm excited to share about story magic and learn from these tools of lineage with you how to live in a deep way, in a way that is evolving, because we need to do that as fast as we can and create a new world. And honestly, as saying as fast as you can isn't even really accurate, because what we're doing is repatterning, and what we've been doing is going too fast and doing too much. So that's burnt us out. So what we need, it's created disease and oppression, which is just like a disease. So what we need to do is just wake up, become lucid dreamers, and stay there, create a sustained version of that, where we're more and more present and connected and responsible, and weave relationships of wellness, justice, where everybody is able to actually live, including the natural world and all life. And yeah, astrology is a tool to weave us into that kind of wholeness, and to show us our individual work, internal work, and work in our communities, where we can find belonging again and find our place, our truth, our authentic self. This is what it requires. And then we find our threads in a network to build this new world together. So come learn with me as we go through all of these guides and star maps and story maps. We are going to work with it in beautiful ways. This is a deep healing journey that you can be on in your own way, in your own relationship, and you can develop these relationships in your own way. And in that way, even we're just kind of moving away from that idea that you somehow need an expert, or you need somebody to tell you how to do it. You can just start to develop your own relationships with all of it as yourself in a relational sense. And we can start to all have this relational reality and not be so separate from nature. So welcome home. Here we go. Yay.